Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm getting this episode up a day late, and also you might hear a little echo. I got a new mic after almost 5 years of podcasting. I finally got a new microphone. The $50 one that I bought when I first started is finally starting to give out. But hey, that $50 mic did really well. Podcasting's pretty cheap to get into, and I love, me, I love a deal. Speaking of that, I had an amazing opportunity, and this is the reason why the episode's coming out late. Amazing opportunity to go kayak in the Everglades National Park for 3 days. And I just got back from that. I thought I'd have time to make the episode yesterday, but I didn't. With Florida Outdoor Adventures. That's the company with Dave, the owner, and Bonesy, one of the guides. We had an amazing time kayaking and camping all over an area called 10,000 Islands. So imagine on the southern edge of Florida, kind of southwest Florida, the Everglades, by the way, is basically a river, but imagine a river that's very shallow and 100 miles wide, and it flows ever so slowly through a landscape, which is obviously a wetland because that water's so shallow. So there's this amazing array of animals and birds and fish, and alligators, as you can imagine, and just different types of landscape. It sounds like just nothing but sawgrass or, grass, but there is so much to it. And we went and explored the edge of the Everglades where it hits the Gulf of Mexico. And what it does, it creates this area called 10,000 Islands, which are all these mangrove islands. Imagine taking a 15,000 piece puzzle and just dropping all the pieces on the floor, and they're all slightly spread out and have just a little distance between them, but not much. That's 10,000 islands, which actually is closer to 15,000, 16,000 islands. And you're just going all through there. It's unbelievable. It never ends, it seems like. It was amazing. We went all the way out to the Gulf and camped. And anyway, Florida Outdoor Adventures, FLOutdooradventures.com. If you want to learn more, they do 3-day, 5-day, and 8-day trips. Highly recommend. It's such my vibe. It's guided, but it's a true adventure. And I rarely do guided trips like this where I'm not by myself or the one in charge. And it was so cool to have someone, two people actually, so knowledgeable, so interested in teaching the group. It was really neat. And so what's cool about today's podcast episode is that Barry Kruse is a guide. He is a huge advocate for guiding. Like if you travel somewhere and you do an adventure, get a guide. It takes you from having to reinvent the wheel to catches you up on so much going on in the area, so much history. And I consider myself a pretty experienced paddler, but I've never taken an official a course to learn the actual fundamentals of paddling. In just those couple days with Dave and Bonesy, I learned so much terminology, so many styles of paddling, so much that just elevated my game in no time. So I really kind of learned the power of guides on this trip. And what's cool is Barry has been, I remember talking about this episode. This episode actually came out, episode 711, actually. That's funny. Back in March 2021, so over 2 years ago now. And Barry has a podcast called Leading Steep, where he talks to full-time guides, career guides, about how they did it, what they've learned, and what lessons there are for all of us. And Barry himself is not a full-time guide. He used to be, and then he took a white-collar job, loves it. That's been his career, but it has been able to fund all these adventures that he's done. So a lot of times on this show, we talk about people leaving white-collar jobs to, be full-time adventurers or whatnot. There's a ton of downsides of that, especially if you have a family. It's stressful. I've tried it. It's really hard. When this podcast had to pay the bills, it was not as fun as it is now. When I have a full-time job, I'm able to enjoy it a lot more. And if I need a new mic, it doesn't set me back too much. So we're going to talk to Barry today. This is a replayed episode, a revisited episode, like I said, and just an amazing, amazing episode. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, we've got a We've got a really interesting story from a really interesting perspective. You heard a little bit about it in the intro, but I wanted to welcome you on the show. Barry, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Mason. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think you know what I'm going to ask next. Where are you coming from?
Where am I speaking from? Listen, I'm in Rockland, California, which is a suburb of Roseville near Sacramento. But your adventure sports folks are going to love this place. It's right at the foot of the Sierra Mountains, ideally located for all kinds of adventure sports. Like I'm about 100 miles, give or take 20 miles or so, from San Francisco, Napa, Tahoe, and even Yosemite. And there's great rock climbing and skiing and biking and everything. But for me, Mason, it's especially the whitewater. There are rivers all over California to be run, and people think of this state for Hollywood and beaches and technology and wine, but hardcore boaters come here from around the world just for the whitewater. So I love where I live, Rockland, California.
Man, Barry, I'll be honest, my heart has never left Yosemite Valley once it entered there. And it's all of California in general has just always been so incredible. And it sounds like about the perfect place I would ever want to live too. So I don't know what it's like in Rockland, but maybe we'll have to come visit sometime to scope it out. Don't know if you're open to that.
I got plans to take you rafting sometime, Mason, so
Oh
I
my
hope you will
goodness.
take us up on that.
I hate to diverge this, but the last rafting experience I had, my mother-in-law came out to Colorado and we went rafting with some friends, and I thought he knew what he was doing. And it wasn't that intense, but we had no clue what we were doing, and it ended up being one of the scariest moments of my life. Thought I was going to lose my mother-in-law. She was, going under the rapids, screaming for me to come save her, and yeah, our relationship changed that day. She's over at the house right now, which is great, watching my son. But still, that was a last rafting experience I had out there. But I would like a new one to replace it in a
We'll,
positive light.
we'll work that out. I'll do my best. I'll promise to get you on the right kind of trip and give you the right kind of experience, Mason, rather than the scary experience with your mom-in-law.
Oh man, no, I appreciate it. Well, Barry, I've been talking a little too much. I'd love to learn about, where you grew up, what you grew up doing, how you got into rafting. I don't think you grew up in Rockland. Where was home for you growing up?
Well, I am a Northern California, so I grew a Northern Californian, and I did grow up near here. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my father was a high school teacher. So if you think back to your favorite teacher in high school, that was my dad, Jim Kruse. Everybody loved him. And so he was a high school teacher in the wintertime. But in the summertime, Mason, we would travel 800 miles north because he was a park ranger in Mount Rainier National Park. So every summer as a kid, we lived in Mount Rainier National Park for about 14 years, and some years were better than others. Some years there were other kids my age, some years not. But I spent a lot of time just skipping rocks and learning how to fly fish on my own, and it was a great experience for a young kid. So that's kind of how I got introduced to the outdoor world, hanging out with rangers and with other folks in the outdoors. So split time between the San Francisco Bay Area and Washington State. And then later in life, after my legendarily mediocre team sports career ended, I went to college and I got into rock climbing. I was a pretty serious rock climber way back in the day, and that got me introduced to rafting. Actually, I taught a guy to rock climb named Todd Demarest, and he said, "Hey Barry, if you take me climbing more, I'll take you whitewater rafting." And so my first exposure to rafting was at guide school, and I just fell in love with it immediately. I just fell in love with whitewater rafting. You get to see amazing places, you get to meet lots of people, you get to challenge yourself with a little bit of adventure, and you get to yell. We don't get to yell all that much in our life, Mason. So you get to yell commands, and
Right.
there's a lot of joy in all of that. But that's how I got started in whitewater rafting, and so it was many years ago, but it's been a big part of my life ever since.
You found it via climbing. And what do you think about it? Was it just, you mentioned a few things like yelling. I could see how that would be attractive to any aspect of life. Having the green light to scream at the top of your lungs is pretty fun. Um,
Yeah.
what else about it drew you to it? What about water versus the rock? It seems to be that climbing kind of takes over people's lives more so than whitewater. I don't know. Maybe we've just seen that story enough times. But what was it for you?
Well, look, the candid truth is I was also a pretty mediocre mountaineer and rock climber as well. I'm 6'4", so I'm a big guy, and you're never going to be Alex Honnold. Gosh, I hope he's not 6'4", but you're never going to
No, I think
be
he's
Tommy.
5'11". I think he's 5'11".
There you go. Okay, let me put it this way: you're never going to be Tommy Caldwell when you're 6'4", right? You're never going to be a great rock climber if you're a big dude like I am. So so my career was going to be limited in that way. But one of the things that I love best about rafting is that it's a group activity, it's a team activity. In fact, it's a great family pandemic activity, despite your experience in Colorado, Mason. But it's a great team activity, and so it requires a lot of coordination, a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration between a team, and that was one of the things that I liked best. Further, when I started rafting, something really interesting happened. I'll call it the dawn of the self-bailing era. Now, people take this for granted now. Every raft is a self-bailing raft, which means it has an inflatable floor in it, and so when water comes into the boat, it basically just drains out of the boat. But the first year that I rafted, there were no self-bailing boats. And so that year, the next year, I rafted, me and a buddy of mine, Eric Martin, we bought this boat called a SOTAR, which is an acronym for State of the Art Raft. They're still in business. They still produce great boats. But anyhow, we bought this SOTAR, and it immediately opened up the world to whitewater boating in a way that it had never been opened up before. Now, kayakers in plastic boats have been doing wild, crazy stuff for years. But for those of your folks who are into different sports, the self-bailing raft was to whitewater what the shock absorber was to mountain biking, or what shaped skis were to skiing, or what cam locks were to rock climbing. Right? It just completely changed the world and allowed us to go do things that we had never done before. And so that was really what inspired me about this. Is me and some young buddies at the time started doing all kinds of Class 5 whitewater and doing all kinds of new exploratory trips all over California, because there was still a lot of virgin ground to be covered. So that's one of the things that I really like best about it, is this whole notion of camaraderie, this notion of getting to see places, even still, that a lot of people don't get to go, because this boat gives you access to things that you otherwise might not be able to do. Get into canyons that are not easily hikeable, for example. So there's lots to love about it, but I think the best things for me are the camaraderie, the teamwork, and the places that you get to see.
So there is a teamwork about it that I didn't think about other sports. There's not that same level of teamwork in some of the other outdoor sports in general. Like, you can be there doing the same sport with other people, but it's not necessarily crucial to the success of everybody. But with rafting, it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
So can I ask you this? Before the self-bailing era, did your raft just fill up with water and you just had
Precisely.
so there was nothing to do about that other than to
No,
bail it out?
that's right. Exactly. You'd carry these, 5-gallon paint buckets with you in the trip. And so when water would splash into the boat, your boat could end up weighing 2,000 pounds full of water, right? And you would just basically careen through a rapid with no control, and somebody bailing full time, grabbing this 5-gallon bucket and throwing water out of the boat. So yeah, that's why I say it radically changed the universe of whitewater and rafting when we no longer had to bail the boat. It was just a surprising experience. Now, rafting has still evolved even beyond that, Mason. Now, today, right, a lot of people are rafting in ways we call R2, or two people in the raft, right? Classic rafting means typically, like a paddle boat, means R7, seven people in the raft, or R5, right? Five people in the raft. But a lot of people now are R2ing real serious hard whitewater. So you and I might sit right next to each other, just the two of us in a boat, and go run hard whitewater that way. And there's even this crazy new boat called a creature craft, where they're running like Class 5 and 6, huge whitewater. It's almost like being inside of a barrel in some way. But the sport continues to evolve in its way. The self-bailer, though, was the big revolution that really changed things and allowed us to go much steeper, do all kinds of crazy, fun, amazing stuff.
That is too cool to be able to see it in that transition happen before your eyes was I'm sure pretty incredible. Now, at this time, or when exactly did you get into guiding, and how did you fare with other guides? Because I'll be honest, I've conversed with you a few times, and you're just very professional, very put together. Essentially, almost the exact opposite of most river raft guides that I've met in my personal life, and not in a bad way. They're just a little more free spirited. I don't know how to say it, but you know what I'm saying.
No, I absolutely know what you're saying, and first of all, thanks for the kind things to say. I learned a lot about being a better leader and a better person as a rafting guide because as a guide, you encounter so many different personalities and so many different people, and you're responsible for their lives effectively. When you have people in your boat, you have people on your trip, you're very much responsible for their well-being, and so it teaches you a lot. Now, look, there is the very bohemian rafting guide and guide in many adventure sports, of course, who takes that as their lifestyle and does that around the world. But there are a lot of very professional whitewater people as well. I run this thing called Junior Guides Raft Camp, Mason, and it's a little nonprofit summer camp for kids out here in California. We run two camps a year and take about 140 kids or so through the summer camp. Many of our families call back and say it's their favorite activity they book every year. This year we sold out in 15 minutes, so that
Wow.
that tells you something. But 2 years ago I had this woman call up and she said she was a mom call up and she said like you did, Barry, I'd like to bring my kids to Junior Guides Raft Camp, but many of the rafting guides I know are kind of bohemians. I'm saying that in the nicest kind of way, but she said, they're not necessarily, the folks who are stand-up citizens. And I said, look, I appreciate your perspective, but let me tell you about a few of my friends. I got a friend, Tyler Smith, who's a very well-known, very successful surgeon who says that he's a better doctor because he was a raft guide. A friend of mine, Amy Flynn, she's a senior professor at I think it's at San Francisco State University or University of San Francisco. Forgive me, Amy, but she's done very well for herself. My friend Juliette Starrett is very well known exercise physiologist, was recognized by Michelle Obama for this initiative that she had called Stand Up Kids. Like I just really believe that being a guide and being around people can make you a better person if you take that on, if you understand this gift and this lesson that you're getting from being a leader and really leading people. So I got to say, I put rafting guides in the net positive column, Mason. So I
Net
think very
positive column.
favorably about this business.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. HelloFresh takes the hassle out of mealtime by delivering pre-portioned ingredients and easy-to-prepare recipes right to your door. You can skip the checkout lines and get outside in the warmer weather as spring is coming because HelloFresh has dinner covered. April is also Earth Month, and HelloFresh is always committed to a cleaner planet. On average, HelloFresh meals have about a 31% lower carbon footprint than same meals made from supermarket ingredients. Plus, nearly all of HelloFresh's packaging materials are curbside, recyclable in most of the U.S. I'm personally a big fan of HelloFresh, and you can also gift it. That's something I like to do, is gifting the meals to people who are maybe have someone in the hospital or just had a baby, something like that, where you're not just sending them already made food that maybe they don't like or they don't want, but it's very easy to make meals, fresh ingredients, and they can kind of make it on their own terms, make it when they're ready to eat, but isn't too much of a lift in the kitchen. So I think it's a great gift idea too, and that's actually what I've used it for in the past. If you want to try some of their ready-to-go fresh meals, you can learn more by going to hellofresh.com/ASP50 for Adventure Sports Podcast and use the code ASP50 for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, that's ASP50 at hellofresh.com/ASP50 for 50% off plus free shipping. So give it a shot now. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. Yeah, I think that's just, you identify a certain segment of the rafting community has probably gotten more spotlight, probably gotten a little more stereotyped. And, the folks that aren't meeting that demographic, you don't ever guess to be rafting guides or former rafting guides. So that's probably what it is. So for you, something that you did that was really interesting is you made the transition out of rafting and into kind of the professional world. And it wasn't an awful transition. So many times, this is what's one reason I'm really excited to talk to you. So many times we hear I was so dissatisfied with my life, working the 9 to 5. I had, had all the checklists that a modern society said I should have, and I was very
Yeah.
unhappy.
and I decided to go do an adventure sport and become a guide and start a company. We hear that story a lot. Um, that story doesn't always end well for folks. Me
No,
being
that's
someone
right.
who's tested that out, and saying, wow, it's really stressful. It's not very, secure in a lot of ways. You did the opposite in a lot of ways. Can you tell us about that? What led to that transition, and how you managed it, how you approached it, and what it has done for your life?
Sure. I respect and adore so many of my full-time rafting guide friends from around the world. I have one friend named Barry Kruse, and she's been a full-time guide since I was a guide for the last, 3 decades or so. And she's an extremely well-respected guide, has guided and lived around the world, done amazing things from Bhutan to Bangor, Maine. She's an incredible guide and an incredible human being. But, there was an old college football commercial, an NCAA college football commercial, Mason, and the commercial I think went something like this: there are 60,000 NCAA athletes in the United States, and 99% of them are going to go pro in something other than their sport. And I
Mm,
think that's the case for the 150 million Americans or so who also work full-time jobs like I do, but still passionately pursue their adventure sport the way that I pursue rafting. I'm very happy in my white collar career, having been a whitewater guy now. But yeah, when I got out of college, I took a job with a company here in Sacramento, a technology company here in Sacramento in the newspaper business. And I've largely been working full time most of the time since then as a white collar guy. But the fact that I'm an adventurer as well, and I still even work some commercial rafting trips on occasion, it really is a good balance for me in my life. I love my company. I work for a company called Franklin Templeton Investments. We're a global asset management firm, and I have a great job with that company. I'm the global head of the Franklin Templeton Academy. We train tens of thousands of financial advisors around the world in 30 countries and 16 languages. And I love my work, and it's very fulfilling to me there. And my adventure life contributes really favorably to my work life, to my business life. It gives me a lot of gratification. It gives me a lot of respect and appreciation for both of those worlds and for all the things I have. So, again, I'm speaking to the 99% of your audience who are not professional adventurers and saying, "Look, I'm a weekend warrior like you. I rafted 35 days last year, so I'm very, very happy with that." So, I hope that kind of addresses your question and answers that.
absolutely. It's just great to talk to somebody who is content, I guess is maybe the best word, or
Oh
or,
yeah.
or satisfied with with not going into the guiding world or the full-time adventure world. I think that in today's world, Instagram can kind of muddle the reality of that lifestyle in a lot of ways, especially with a family or with responsibilities, without letting you know some of the other side of that. And so, would you say that guiding or a background in adventure uh, is common in your line of work, or is it more common than we would think, or has it made you sort of a unique perspective in the work you do?
There are lots of professionals in the finance world and elsewhere who are doing pretty great adventure stuff. We have a portfolio manager at the firm named Michael Hosenstab, and he climbed Everest a few years ago, and so there are some pretty serious adventurers at my business as well who participate in all kinds of stuff. But like I say, I mean, I think that having a passion, having an outside interest, an outside purpose really is extremely helpful. And many of my folks, many of the people that I appreciate have this kind of secondary interest, whether they're pretty serious rock climbers like my buddy Gary Fluid, or stand-up paddle boarders, or whatever sport they're pursuing. I think it's so important to have this draw in your life, especially if you have kids, Mason, right? Especially if you're a parent and exposing your kids to the outdoors and getting them to travel with you. My kids and I did a bunch of trips last year during the pandemic. Many times my wife would drive shuttle for us or go with us, and then the two kids would get in the boat with me. We do a one boat trip on the Middle Fork of the American River or something. And I got to tell you, 2020 was a real gift to us in that regard. It was amazing. I will never forget this, and know that I'm never going to have that kind of quality time again with my 15-year-old and my 17-year-old, right? Who will leave the house in some near period. But it was a real gift that way. And that's why I say that I think whitewater rafting is such a great family activity. It's such a great pandemic activity.
Is there a time or a moment you could share with us where your background in guiding or having this, not even something as like, oh, something I used to do, but something I actively do has helped you in your line of work, whether it was decision making or making it through a challenging time? Could you share a story like that where being proficient in adventure sports has helped you get through something you're going through at work?
Yeah, I'm gonna share a very specific example with you. So I'll ask you and your listeners to kind of imagine us being together in this. Um, so let's just say, Mason, that in May you're going to be out in California, and I'm going to take you on a river called the North Fork of the American. There's a section up there that I love. Of the 70 rivers I've run, or so, this is my favorite section. It's called Giant Gap. And this trip is a great adventure. We're gonna pack the boats and all the gear the night before. We're gonna roll the boat up like a big wheel, a big tire, and we're gonna roll it down this trail about a mile and a half down this into this 2,000-foot gorge. And we're gonna run this section of whitewater, which is about 14 miles. So we're gonna get up real early on Saturday morning at about 5 a.m. and we're gonna drive 35 miles or so from here. We're gonna unpack the boat, roll it down this hill, and then we're going to pump up the boat at the shore of the river in the Giant Gap section, and we're going to start rafting. About 3.5 miles into this trip, class 4, class 5 whitewater, just a spectacular canyon. But about 3.5 miles into this trip is a rapid called Nutcracker. And it's going to cause me to lose a little sleep the night before because Nutcracker worries me. And so above that rapid, Mason, I'm going to give you a little safety speech specifically about this rapid. It's going to sound like this. We're about to drop into this rapid Nutcracker. It's you can see it looks like a bobsled chute. It just looks like a white, violent looking bobsled chute. There's a reactionary wave on the right, another reactionary on the left, another on the right, and then there's a giant hole at the bottom. And even if we have a perfect run, as has happened to me in the past, we could flip in the hole at the very bottom of this rapid. That's not so big a deal usually in what we call a pool drop river, but in this particular case, if we flip or have a problem at that last hole, that last big hydraulic, there's another rapid only a few hundred yards downstream called Locomotive Falls. It's a 5-foot waterfall into a nasty recirculating hydraulic hole is very difficult to get out of. So my point to you is that if we have a problem in Nutcracker, you need to swim for an eddy. You need to self-rescue. You need to get yourself into some calm water so that you don't end up drifting into Locomotive Falls where you don't want to swim. Because I've been on top of an upside boat surfing in that hole for 10 minutes before until somebody threw a rope to get me out. So anyhow, what I'm telling you there, what I'm explaining to you, Mason, in this story is that I'm setting you up for what's going to happen, and I'm explaining to you what we're about to go through, and I'm mentally preparing you for that rapid. And even as we drop into the rapid, I'm going to yell for you, as I talked about yelling before. I'm going to yell for you to take a few deep breaths in case you have a bad swim, right? So, maybe psychological more than anything else, but nevertheless, we're going to run this rapid. So how does this relate in the corporate world? Well, my firm Franklin Templeton went through a pretty significant merger last year. We acquired a firm called Legg Mason, a bunch of terrific staff there. But a big corporate merger like that of 12,000 employees coming together can produce a lot of anxiety. There's a Barry Kruse here, and there's a more talented Barry Kruse at this other firm, and so that can produce some anxiety. So one of the things that I really try to do as a leader, and one of the reasons I'm writing this book and working on this other podcast project, is to try to prepare people for what they can anticipate, to try to mentally prepare them for that flip and that difficult situation where, there will be challenges to our work, and there will be reorganizations, and there will be, lots of inquiries into what we are doing for our business. And I want to mentally prepare them to have some courage around that, to make sure they're doing their best work, to make sure they're in the right mind space, to understand what's going on, because we're going to have to make some difficult decisions. So anyhow, I that's a long story to tell you that I think the notion of guiding, the notion of being compassionate and confident and competent and caring and communicative and clear and concise, all these things, all these C words for leadership, I think this is a really helpful notion that translates so well from the guiding world into the corporate world. I hope that was a good way to describe that.
Beautiful stories. So many lessons can be learned out on that river, man. So something so big and challenging like that merger, or something so anxiety-inducing like that hydraulic, or how did you describe that? That was
big hydraulic, a big hole at the bottom of Nutcracker.
Big hydraulic bowl. I mean, I know I can visualize exactly what you're saying. Like I know what that is, and I mean, how do you get everyone on the same page or mentally prepare yourself to face something that could be so anxiety inducing? You say you lose sleep the night before. How do you know it's the right way to go, the right thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. No, no. And as a guide, it's a pretty big responsibility, right? If we're going to go do that trip. And so when I say I'm losing sleep over that rapid, I'm just thinking about the day ahead and mentally scouting the run as you would. But you come to these decision points both in the corporate world, but in the in the adventure world as well, where you make go no go decisions, right? So I mean, if we hiked into that run that Saturday, and I recognize that the water is too high for us to be there, then we're hiking out. We'll leave the gear there, or and we'll come back and get it later, or we'll boat another day. But you have these go no go decisions that all of your adventurers listening now have to make on occasion, where you're going to determine that you hike out. And you know what, Mason, I've hiked out of a half dozen rivers where things just didn't go well. We flipped in the first rapid, we rolled up the boat, put it behind a tree, and hiked out. Came back a week later. It happens. You have to be prepared for that, prepared to abandon things. And then on a trip like Giant Gap, it's even more serious because this canyon is dead vertical in spaces. You cannot hike out. So that's what makes the river, which is generally kind of class 4, class 4 plus, but that's what makes it class 5 is this level of commitment and that potential risk that you go through. So those are all the things that you're kind of triangulating on a very serious trip. When I've guided a run like Cherry Creek, there's a river near Yosemite called the Tuolumne River. I'm sure you've heard of Tuolumne Meadows. You said how much you love Yosemite, but the California Classic is a river called the Tuolumne. It's a brilliant class 4 run. It just has really beautifully spaced rapids and aesthetically neat rapids. But the run above that is called Cherry Creek, and we also run that, or the Upper Tuolumne. We also run that commercially. And on that run, Mason, we actually do a swim test. There's a physical fitness test before the run. There's a swim test. You have to be able to swim under the raft in order to be able to go on this trip. So we start down the river, go to about a half mile or so down the river, and then we make people do this the rest of this swim test, the physical fitness test. And you know what? We've hiked people out. We just walk them out right there. There's a place where the bus is fairly close. So you're trying to manage risk properly as a guide, the same way that you're managing risk in a business as well, right? Managing investment risk, I don't do that, but manage business risk for my business unit and for the things that we were headed. But that's where I see these kind of parallels, is in this risk management and risk assessment that you're constantly doing as a guide and as a business leader.
As a guide and as a business leader, someone who took, at least on this show, the path less taken, moving away from full-time adventure, moving more into a balanced life. What kind of joys or what kind of experiences has having that white-collar position in a position of leadership in business, what has that allowed your lifestyle and allowed your life in general? Some of the things that you enjoyed because of that.
Yeah, I could have traveled the world as a full-time guide, right? And as a very qualified guide, I could go to work in Chile or go to work in Nepal or Bhutan or wherever. I could do that as a guide, and I can also do that in my work life as well. So the firm that I work for is a global company. Franklin Templeton has offices in 30 countries now, and so it's a global company, and so that's afforded me the opportunity to travel pretty extensively. In my whole business career, I've been to almost 50 countries now. I've been to 48 states and almost 50 countries. And so I never say no, Mason. Somebody says there's a business trip happening or there's a reasonable business reason for me to be somewhere, I always say yes. There's always an opportunity there. And then almost always I will try to at least carve out some time for adventure and try to do something like hire a guide somewhere else. Even as a guide, I love being with guides. I love I hired a great guide in Istanbul, for example, to show me around the city for a couple of days. And I hired a wonderful guide last summer in Washington when I was up there during the pandemic. We got out of California, went to Washington State, hired this woman named Olivia Race with Northwest Mountain School, who was fantastic, gave me a great day of rock climbing with just a little bit of everything. It was fantastic. But so the business travel certainly has afforded me the opportunity to go places and do things that I might not otherwise have or have done so in different ways.
So you've got the best of both worlds, man. You've gotten to travel, getting paid to, which is nice. And there's some perks to it. Let's just put it that way.
I don't take it for granted. I feel enormously blessed. I work very hard at my job. I work with a great team of people, really wonderful folks, and I'm really committed to being the best leader I can be for them and for my firm. But no, I'm enormously blessed to get to do what I get to do.
Mm, absolutely. So, we have a lot of young people that listen to this show that get inspired by the stories that go out and try to make their some of their first adventures happen or to continue on. And there's always this time of life where it feels like there's this diversion in the river. We got to choose a path and start pursuing a path. For folks that are building up that adventure resume or enjoying those experiences that might be approaching a transition, any advice you have for them as they may fully try to pursue this career in adventure sports? Any advice you have for them is just like a backup, things to keep in mind, or for the folks that are ready to make a jump into a different world altogether. Anything that you learned yourself?
Sure. My first bit of advice is don't discount the fact that you can have a fulfilling life outside of the full-time adventure world. Now, listen, like I say, as I completely respect the people who are full-time adventurers. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, Zach Collier, the other day. He runs a very successful rafting company, Northwest Rafting. He does a great job with it. He does a ton of YouTube media. You can find him on YouTube, but he's very, very fulfilled. And I think that there is a path for becoming a full-time adventurer and really having a fulfilling and gratifying life in that way. But I want to encourage folks not to dismiss the fact that you can still have a very fulfilling and gratifying life in the corporate world as well. Mason, especially now, right? People are working from home, and many big companies, Salesforce and many other big companies, are inviting folks to work from home or from wherever, right? So you could easily live in a mountain town, do your 9 to 5 job, and work for a great company, earn a good living, and still have the chance to go rock climbing in the afternoon or skiing in the afternoon, right? Boating on the weekends, whatever you want to be doing. So, I would encourage people to keep an open mind about the possibilities of having both a fulfilling corporate life and a fulfilling adventure life.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible.
Hey folks, if you're looking for an amazing new show to listen to, we teased it a little bit with one of the episodes last week on the podcast. You'll see it on April 11th. That was we plugged an episode in of Hidden Trails of Oregon. It's a podcast produced by the award-winning travel writer Aaron Miller, who is also a former guest on the show and friend of the podcast. And he has this amazing new show called The Hidden Trails of Oregon. And the episode that we had was Crater Lake, lava tubes, and fly fishing with a Native American guide. Well, there are a bunch of other episodes too. Go check those out wherever you get podcasts, Hidden Trails of Oregon. They were recorded on location with surround sound and are basically on the ground adventure stories like we do. Like on this podcast, we sit and talk to people, but this one is there on the adventure itself, recording what it sounds like where you are. It feels so immersive. And some of the highlights of the series include kayaking with whales, hiking in the redwoods, caving in lava tubes, and snowshoeing all the way up to Crater Lake. It's definitely a unique listening experience for folks who like this show. I guarantee you're going to love it. And by the way, it was just voted for a Webby Award. It was nominated, so it's extremely high quality. Like that's a big deal to get a Webby. They're nominated one of the best documentary podcasts. So check it out, Hidden Trails of Oregon. Find it anywhere you get podcasts.
That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. I think it's so possible. You make a great point. The pandemic has, in a lot of ways, accelerated that. I know it has for us. I work totally from home, extremely fulfilling job, much more, so different than I expected my life to go. But I'll have to be honest. I'm so much more fulfilled now in a more well-rounded way, if that makes sense. It's not all about me and my adventures. We're able to build a little more sturdy foundation in life and build on that and kind of allow ourselves to dream a little bit because of these possibilities. I'd love to ask you this before we jump into talking about leading Steep. I would assume one of the other things it has allowed you to do is to pursue giving back with a little bit more through the Junior Guides Raft Camp.
No, that's right. Well, look, we have great guides who are affiliated with Junior Guides, but you're right. I mean, I am able to give time pretty generously to Junior Guides. My firm has a great philanthropy policy, altruism policy, where not only do they give us time to work on charity things and nonprofit causes, especially around diversity and inclusion right now, which is just so important. But not only do they give us causes, but we even have a program at our firm called Dollars for Doers, where if you were involved in a charity and you do some number of hours for that charity, the firm will actually help you sponsor the activity. So yes, it's been really lucky in that way to be able to contribute that way. I was going to share with you too that everybody's lost something in this pandemic. Some folks have lost much more than others, obviously, with the loss of loved ones and being sickened or losing jobs and so forth. Everybody's losing something. I'm just suggesting too that people look for the gift, as my wife often says, right? Look for the gift in all these things as well. Spending more time with your kids, or as you've done, Mason, being able to move to a place that better suits your family and spending more time with your family. So these things are challenges, of course, but there are real gifts here as well, and we're certainly taking the benefit of that.
Such a great principle. I'd love to also, before we jump into Lead and Steep, there's a rapid named after you, I've been told. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that is true, and I'd love to tell you that it was something really grand and something really glamorous. It'd be like Kruse's Cascade or something like that. I don't know,
Right.
but no, I'd say the rapid is ignominiously named after me, Mason. And I'll just tell you the story. About 50 miles from here is an esoteric little creek called Fordyce Creek. And it's not very often run because it doesn't often have water. It's a dam controlled section. And so sometimes it runs late in the summer, but it's extremely steep and it's very serious. It's class 5. So me and some buddies, we did the first raft descent of that river. And like climbing routes get names, right? I mean, climbing routes get incredible names, and ski runs, for example, get names, right? That rapids get names as well. And sometimes it's by a physical feature of the rapid or a location for the place or some piece of folklore about the rapid. So me and my buddies were on the first descent of Fordyce Creek, and we named one rapid at the very outset. It was this long water slide that we called Eraserhead, and that name sticks, and it's a great name for the rapid. We felt like if you fell out of the boat in this rapid, you're probably going to lose your face because it's just really shallow and long water slide. But anyhow, downriver, we'd run a bunch of stuff, and we'd portage some rapids that were just looked unrunnable to us in the raft. But we got down to this one rapid. I ran down the river, and I looked at it, and it was just kind of this little waterfall. It was like a 5-foot or 6-foot waterfall, no big deal. And so I ran back up to the raft, and I said, "Hey, fellas, no problem. We're just going to drop into this thing, do kind of a little airplane turn maneuver on the left side of the rapid, and we'll be fine. We'll just go straight through it. It was just one single drop." So anyhow, as we dropped into this rapid, we suddenly the boat just went under the waterfall on the right side. I had completely not anticipated this, but the shape of the rapid is like a fold. It's like a shape of a V, and so the boat drops into this rapid, and it just immediately and violently flipped. It just went upside down immediately. So my buddies washed out of the rapid immediately, but the boat got sucked back into the rapid and upside down. And I was underneath this upside down boat with, the waterfall running over the top of the boat. And so this buddy of mine starts yelling, "Where's Barry? Where's Barry?" And so this rapid will forevermore be known as Where's Barry, because I was stuck under the boat, grabbing the thwart, this cross tube, trying to hang on. I had these spray pants on. They got sucked down around my ankles, And finally, my buddy grabbed the boat, pulled me up on shore, and I just, collapsed like, nauseously, right? But this rapid will forevermore be ignominiously known as Where's Barry, I'm ashamed to say. But at least my name's in a rapid somewhere.
The legacy will continue. Where's Barry? Where's Barry's rapid? I can see that.
Where's Barry on Fordyce Creek? You can look it up in some dark corner of the internet. It's still there. They still call it that.
Oh man, that is too funny. Barry, you've turned some of these lessons and some of this insight into a new project called Leading Steep. Folks have heard a little bit about that too as well in the intro. Can you tell us about why you started this? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, the guiding. My guiding experience certainly contributes greatly even to my professional experience, as I mentioned. And so many years ago, I started to recognize the fact that as a leader, as a manager in business, many of the things that I was doing echoed or paralleled the things that I had been doing as a whitewater guide. There's just a lot to learn about being a leader there. So I started writing these things down, these little anecdotes down. I came to a list of about 50 of them, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to write a book. I'll just make these stories, turn these stories like the Nutcracker story I told you earlier on, Mason, right? I'll turn these stories into a book. And then I thought, it'd be even better actually if I captured a whole bunch of stories from people, from other guides in other disciplines. And then I thought, if I started calling people and explaining to them what I was trying to do, maybe I could even get some famous people, some really significant people, like many of the people, some of the people you've had on your podcast as well here. So I call this thing Leading Steep: Adventure Stories, Leadership Allegories, and Wisdom from the World's Great Adventure Guides. And so I'm doing a podcast right now, and I'm writing a book based largely on these stories. The book will be out later this year, but the podcast is going great. And these stories are just really resonating, and they're really landing with people. You mentioned young people, especially young people. I'm getting young people who are sending me these random messages just saying how important these lessons have been to them. So I love this project. Mostly I just love getting the chance to meet these extraordinary people. You've heard the podcast, Mason. What do you think?
Barry, I'll have to say, man, it's this show tends to be a little more whimsical in the sense of you never know. It can be hit or miss. Your show, it's like, well, if I need some inspiration, if I need some lessons, if I need some podcast that's gonna teach me something, I'm gonna go to Barry's podcast, Leading Steep. It's just, man, it's you're just a professional all around. I'm still this wandering vagabond spirit in a lot of ways, and it comes through in just about everything I do. But you've done a great job so far, and I've reached out to some of the folks on the show, just connected with them in LinkedIn, and read more of what they've done, and it's just opened my eyes in a lot of ways. Even 6 episodes in, 7, I don't even know what you're at now, but I've listened to every one, and I've really, really enjoyed them.
Well, listen, don't sell yourself short, Mason. The way that we met was me calling you and asking for your advice on a podcast, and I am eternally grateful to you for that. But I agree, the guests are amazing. I'm doing a lot of talking during this episode with you, but in my podcast, actually, I just do what you're doing now, which is the inquisition, the questioning of these guests. And these folks are remarkable. And I'm really genuinely doing this because I'm learning too. Zach Collier, as I mentioned him earlier on, he's just a sage in the whitewater rafting world. And he's a better leader now because he decided to be. Jim Coffey's this rescue expert, internationally known rescue expert, terrific. Carrie Gray, who does these amazing adventures for the uber wealthy. And then Richard Bangs. I think you heard that episode. I mean, Richard Bangs is a modern day Indiana Jones. He was one of the fathers of the adventure travel industry, and he had such great sage wisdom to share with our audience. Really a true example of the fact that I think the best guides, the best adventure guides I know also happen to be the most humble people I know. And Richard Bangs he just exonifies that. An amazing individual.
Man, Barry, this is so cool. Have you, at just its basic level, have you enjoyed doing the podcast?
Well, I'm learning a lot. The project's called Leading Steep, and my learning curve has been incredibly steep as well. I'm no pro at this at all. I'm just a naturally inquisitive guy, and so that's really helped out. I've got a great production company helping me out called Hatch, and they've been really wonderful. But I really wanted to focus on high production values. I really wanted to make it a really attractive sounding show and a really interesting show, and so I give a lot of focus to editing and content and all that. But it's been a blast. It's just been such a blast. And I've had outreach even from other guides who want to be on the show. And so I think my favorite part about it, I'm guessing is one of your favorite parts about your show, is just getting the chance to meet these wonderful and remarkable people, right? I'm really focused on guides, Mason. You're focused on, top adventurers like Tommy Caldwell.
I'm focused on stories.
Yeah, you're focused on stories, right? And but still on, incredible people, right? Ben Morton and Ashley Winchester, Tommy Caldwell, Brandy Mueller. These people were amazing. I've listened to these shows, and they're remarkable people. But yeah, my spin on this whole thing is the leadership aspect of being a guide in really any outdoor discipline. And so I'm meeting some incredible people. It's been a total blast.
Barry, I can absolutely foresee this being a resource for folks to just who are interested in this world to be sent. Like, you got to listen to this podcast, go through each episode. There's so much wisdom. Your overall kind of project is to write this book as well. Can you tell us about that? What can you share about the book?
Well, the book is coming together nicely. I've written about 45,000 words or so, and so I've finished with my first draft. It's a raw draft. I'm working with this company called Scribe Media. They've been wonderful, and so I've written this first draft of the project, and I'm already thinking, to tell you the truth, about writing two books. One of them is this general leadership book for both business leaders and guides, and then maybe a second version of the book that really is targeting just people who work in the guide space, right? Just who work in the adventure guide space, because like you said, some of these outfitters and owners have responded to me to say just what you're saying. Like, hey, I'm going to ask my guides to listen to every episode, which has been extremely gratifying. Again, something I just didn't anticipate with the project. But the book is coming together really nicely, and I'm really proud of the work. And I think especially for the fact that it includes so many of these other stories, right? I mean, one of the guys that I interviewed a couple of years ago, I haven't had the chance to podcast with him yet, but I'm going to, is a fella that everybody in your audience should know. He's a guy named Vern Tejas. I don't know if you've heard that name before. I hope you can get him on your podcast as well, Mason. But Vern Tejas is this incredible man. He wrote a book called 70 Summits. He's summited the seven summits 10 times each, and he's a guide. Not only is he a great athlete and adventurer, but he's a guide. And you can go on a trip with Vern Tejas if you want to go to the top of Africa or wherever it is that you want to travel, the top of Everest, anywhere. You can go with this guy, Vern Tejas. But the lessons that guy shares, and he's so humble, he's just such a gracious man. The lessons that you can learn from him are the kinds of things that I really hope to distill in this book, and that I hope to share with this audience, because it's a fascinating story, and it just makes you a better person. I think makes you a better leader. I think listening to people like him and Susan Meyer's bird watching guide and Vern and all these folks, this is what I'm loving most about this whole project.
It's just so cool to talk to these people. I'm not going to lie. It's the best part about it. It has become fun over time. What other medium exists today where you can have an hour-long conversation with folks and ask them anything you want and learn just about anything from them outside of podcasting? It really doesn't exist. So it's a great world. It's a great way to learn, and it's a great way to have some pretty cool experiences conversing with others. So this has been another example of that, Barry. I really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, no, this has been great. Mason, I want to just share one more thing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The Junior Guides project to me is a real passionate project. It doesn't take a lot of time during my year, but families who attend this thing tell me that it's their favorite thing during the year. They regularly come back, and that's why the thing's sold out in 15 minutes. But I suspect that there are listeners who are located in other whitewater centers, right? I'm thinking about Maine and North Carolina, Colorado, Utah, Washington, Oregon, Costa Rica, New Zealand. But I have this passion that someday we will blow this Junior Guides thing up quite a bit more, right? It's a nonprofit, so we're not looking to make any money, but I could see the Junior Guides concept working so well in these other whitewater centers as well, because it's such a great family experience. I mean, just to tell you about the camp itself, when you bring the kids go with our they go rafting for the day, and they learn about rafting. We're leveraging this outfitter called River Runners, who are fantastic. The kids go rafting for the day. The adults go rafting on their own or go do something else during the day as well. But we all camp together as families during the evenings, Mason, and that's one of the richest times, where the kids are doing skits or little dance party, or we're just talking about the day, looking at silly pictures of the rapids and so forth. But I'd like to plant the seeds for this thing being so much bigger than it is today, and other folks being passionate and involved in it. So again, forgive me for the plug, but again, for the nonprofit, it's juniorguides.org. And it's just such a great story, and people love it so much. I'm really so passionate about it, and it feels so good. I inherited this thing from my friend Sarah Canfield and her late husband, Spencer Rubin, and it's just such a gift. It's a gift to me. It's a gift to the families who go along. It's a gift to the whitewater world. It's a gift to the environment. Kids learn more about the environment. So forgive me for going on and on about it, Mason, but I just feel like this could be such a much bigger deal than it is today. So somebody's going to reach out, I hope, and drop us an email at Junior Guides, and I'll be happy to chat about it.
We all know the lessons and the life lessons and the benefit from just personal development that comes from that.
Yeah.
Happy to plug that. Happy to help in any way. I'm no guide, but I love adventure, and I love watching things grow and watching folks spread this world of adventure. So if there's anything else we can do, man, I'd love to be a part of it. You're obviously a great leader. I'm excited to learn a lot more from you, honestly.
I'm excited to take you rafting sometime, Mason. I hope you're going to get yourself out to California and bring the family out, and we'll do a river trip together. Whether that's Giant Gap and the real gnarly stuff or something more placid.
Well, you're gonna have to get it. Yeah, I'm a little scared at this point. So, you're gonna have to undo a lot of that trauma. But all right. Well, Barry, man, I thank you so much. This has been awesome. Thank you.
This is a real treat. Thank you so much, Mason. A real pleasure.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
At Kroger, we want our fresh produce to meet your expectations, which is why we're dedicated to doing up to a 27-point inspection on our fruits and veggies, checking for things like scarring. In fact, only the best produce like zesty oranges and crisp carrots reach our shelves. Because when it comes to fresh, our higher standards mean fresher produce. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Save big on your favorites with the Buy 5 or More, Save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
When you're struggling with your mental health, the world can seem pretty heavy, like no one understands what you're feeling or you're not sure how to ask for help. But here's the real truth. You're never in this alone. 988 Lifeline's trained crisis counselors are available 24/7 to offer the help and support you need to make it through. No judgment, no stigma, just someone to listen. Text or call 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, day or night. 988. Hope has a new number.